My name is Daniel. This is
Solomon.
This is
Paul.
This is Today we're going to be talking about, do video games make more people violent? We will be talking about a lot of games, but we're going to start off with one of my favorites and also Solomon's favorites, Counter-Strike Global Offensive.
Now CS2.
Now CS2.
Aren't there like 8 of them?
First, we are going to be discussing graphics. Solomon, I'd like to ask you a question.
Absolutely.
For people who have never played CSGO before, can you explain to me in a little bit more detail the rules and the games, some of the mechanics and the visuals?
Yeah, sure. So, Counter-Strike, specifically Global Offensive, which was the most popular title in the franchise, is a first-person competitive shooter game. So typically it's played in a 5v5 game mode in which there's a terrorist team and a counter-terrorist team. The terrorist team's objective is to plant a bomb. Counter-terrorists sort of defend bomb sites in which the bombs can be planted, and their objective is to either prevent the plant from occurring by eliminating the enemy team or defusing the bomb once it is planted. The terrorists could win by either having the bomb detonate or by killing the counter-terrorist team.
That sounds great. I'm someone who's played a lot, and that's a pretty good exposition. And I mean, for the sound design, Counter-Strike has a couple of sounds that are played. I know when the bomb detonates, there's a huge bursting sound, and AK-47 has a certain sound in the game.
Right.
And I just wanted to hear a little bit more about, kind of the effects that this has on a player.
I mean, didn't they change the AK sound? I'm pretty sure people got really mad at that.
Yeah, they changed the AK sound and how it shoots, but for the discussion, I'd just like to hear it from you, Solomon.
Yeah, absolutely. So, generally speaking, I know Paul did mention this, that the AK sound has changed, but certain sound effects for certain guns that have been, in play since the inception of Counter-Strike 1.6, that being in the early 2000s, have maintained the sound effect that they'd always had. So, the AK-47, for instance, is instantly recognizable within that community for the sounds it makes when shot, and the sound of the bomb beeping, for instance, is a sound cue for players to discover whether or not the bomb's planted at site A or site B.
Yeah.
It's also a 10-second warning song that plays, for instance, that sort of guides whether or not a player should continue defusing a bomb.
No, yeah, and as a proactive player, you always do want to hear the sounds, the bomb sounds. The game wouldn't be itself really if it wasn't. But obviously, we're talking about violence here. So, I heard you mention counter-terrorists and terrorists. We are talking about violence in games, and the graphics seem that you're using guns to kill people.
Right.
And do you know the age rating of this game, perhaps? Kind of what Steam imposed, on the people who could play it, or?
So I'd imagine that it's going to be rated T, given the fact that there's violence and there's blood. However, it also may be rated M. I'm not sure, but I'd wager M.
And what might enable violence in CSGO? Because you have been talking a lot about, how you could shoot people, you could kill people. It is a terrorist against a counter-terrorist, It is kind of formulated within these bounds of, you have to kill people, you have to do this to win.
Right.
There's no really winning of being friends. You could also knife people, which is kind of one of the funnier ways of killing somebody. So I just like to hear about kind of your opinion on violence, maybe some sources you have from our readings that you'd like to quote.
Yeah, sure. So, it's Counter-Strike Global Offensive and all the other Counter-Strike games, for instance. And as a matter of fact, most team-based FPS games sort of fall under Kalwa's category of Begon, right? Being a competitive game in which players sort of compete using their merits to sort of win a prize, right? And in Counter-Strike, that's, winning rating, whether it's winning for fun and whatnot, things like that. And, violence in Counter-Strike is sort of the way competition is made. And it's sort of built into the game, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, and from my understanding, there are different modes within the game. So there's deathmatch, there's obviously what we were talking about, competitive game mode, which is a 5v5. But I know there's also a specific game mode where you could just go and you could surf, and there's specific mechanics in the game where you could just have fun. So do you feel that for our overall thesis, do you think that it's still applicable to say that these games only cause violence because of a certain format of the game? Or do you think that it's kind of mitigated through kind of the community that's built because there is like when I used to play, I like to surf a lot, so you'd literally just go and you go through like a tunnel and like you'd just walk around and it'd be a lot of fun. So I don't know, I'd like to hear your opinion about that.
So I think it's important to consider. Okay, so like what I'm getting out of this is that you think that, for instance, or what you're presenting for the idea that you're presenting is that like, hey, so Counter-Strike is structured in a way in which violence is necessary in order to win.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah. So and you're asking whether or not that sort of dynamic encourages violent behavior in adolescents, let's say.
Yeah, and also kind of the community base. Like, do you think that the different formats of the game kind of mitigate it? Because do people take the competitiveness that seriously in a deathmatch?
Right.
Like, I don't feel that way. And like, if you're playing Face It, which for anybody who doesn't know is kind of like the most competitive format of the game, where people go on a different software just to play against like pros and people their level. So what do you feel is kind of like, because there is kind of like a spectrum of like competitiveness in the game, so
Yeah.
do you think that kind of enables the violence of like some people who really want to play just only want to play for agon and competitiveness, and then there's people who are just casual people who just want to play for the community and, you know?
Counter-Strike, or at least Counter-Strike Global Offensive, not Counter-Strike 2, enabled game modes that were simply done for fun. No in-game violence, right? Things like surf, bunny hop, things like that, right? Parkour maps. But when it comes to the violence, when it comes to competitiveness in games, I think that's sort of inevitable. Like friction, due to competition and like any sort of competitive activity, is sort of something I see as being inevitable. And I think it's important to consider truly scrutinize like the idea of whether or not a violent activity done competitively really constitutes the incursion of violent behaviors in people. Like, for instance, like, do you think that playing football inclines individuals to be violent people, or things like that, in which violence is necessary in order to win, right?
Yeah. I mean, are you asking me, or?
No, just generally speaking, I think that's
Yeah,
important.
if you guys want to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, well, for me, like what I'm reminded of is like there's a game you've heard of it. I think it's called Ready or Not. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And it's a very controversial game, which is also like a shooting tactical game, but it's not in the same way that CS Go is laid out, right? But I think of like how two people like how there's different ways to enjoy it still, right? Like yeah, it's very controversial. There's a lot of like maps and a lot of violence and a lot of themes that are very like I guess I have to say dark, right? But I think like some people just enjoy being tactical and like
Right.
being immersed into the world of being like for example a SWAT like officer or something, right? And so I think like yeah, similar to CS:GO, right? Like when you're far removed from all the violence and just look at the competitive aspect of it, like I think there's a lot of things that people enjoy about it, right? And like we could also talk about games like Valorant, which I would argue are less like gore like, or like they're less realistic, right? And they like people still play them for competitive aspects, but then again also there's a lot of people who have gone to CS then gone to Valorant and then they still prefer in the end CS, right? So like for me, for example, like I used to play a long time ago CS, and then I played Valorant, but I like if I was to go back to the community, I would preferably pick like CS, right? So like I'm not sure if that's like because they have slightly different, well, not slightly, but they do have some different aspects of the game that make the game feel different or something like that. But yeah, I think there's a lot to consider in whether like something is like actually encouraging violence, depending on how someone enjoys and someone plays the game, right? So yeah, that's what I think personally.
No, yeah, and then I mean, since we are under a time constraint, I really appreciate that comment, Paul. And I was just kind of thinking now about like there's some games that are just specifically based on horror, and I just started thinking about kind of Mahir's game. So Mahir is mentioning GTA 5, which is kind of like one of the most prolific games of the 21st century, released by Riot Games, I'm pretty sure in 2016, and literally one of the best games ever made for community building and just kind of adventure seeking exploration. So I just like to ask you, Mahir, kind of, I mean, from your experience, since you are kind of the expert of GTA, I haven't played that much myself. I like some of the formats in the game of playing with my friends, having adventures, gaining money, and who doesn't like that stuff? But kind of how does it fit into a certain niche of kind of, like your own gangster, you're your own person, and you're kind of defying the rules. Like how would you say that kind of like incites people to kind of play, because like I mean for me it just like elicited like kind of like a feeling that like, you know, I'm the boss, like I rule people. So I mean for the first part, yeah, just run us through the game mechanic, kind of the visual, some of the sound design, and then we could get into one of the questions.
Yeah, so basically there are two aspects of the game, which is story mode and online. Most people obviously play online for the sole reason to combat other people, go against them, or even do illegal activities, starting a gang, selling drugs, which kind of gives them a pleasure that they can never feel online, because they can never really do that without bearing the consequences. And the visuals for it, it's really realistic. It's based on LA, Los Angeles, and the map is free open world. You can go to other players, literally punch them, kill them, whatever you want. But it's like they give the urgency that you have to play it. For me, from my personal experience, I would always be soaked into the game, because you can just it gives you that thrill of just, I don't want to sound like a murderer or something, but it just sounds nice just killing someone in GTA and without feeling the thrill of anything.
Okay.
It's funny. You know?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
And I mean, just kind of bouncing back on that idea, I mean, you did just say that you like loved murdering people within the game format, right?
Yeah.
And I'd imagine if there was somebody who was mentally deranged, he would take that as something, I love killing, so might as well, I have apathy essentially to killing. I don't think you really, you know, felt the burden of murder in GTA 5. So, you know, like, let's say I do go out and play GTA 5 and I'm like mentally deranged, and you know, like I start thinking these ideas that I could shoot people and kill people. Don't you feel that even one death that comes from a game like GTA 5 would be like a tragedy? Because I feel that games should not elicit anything that is harmful, in the fact that it could transition to like a school shooting, mass shootings. And you know, like the first mass shooting in like the schools, it just happened kind of like, it was like an ideal. It's kind of like the idealism of that, you know, I could remove people from the world because of the hatred that's been put onto me. And kind of like, I don't know, I just feel that GTA in its format, if you want to mention like any of the sources that you use, kind of like not only elicits that you could do these things, but do you think that it could actually transition to the real world where people are like, I could punch this person in the game, so why not just do it in real life? I'm not going to face any consequences.
Well, as Hergen Raider said, around page 17 to 18, world building is not really a exact replica of our world, but another world that can be imaginary and can be actually thought of, that become a reality in real life. So GTA cannot really induce those thoughts, because you can't really.
It's separate from our world, you're saying? So it's
Yeah.
like the experiences that you have in GTA, like there's a fine line between our real world and between GTA. Is that what you're trying to say? Or?
I'm trying to say that people have different morals, and they're not played. They don't play GTA as a really young age, or like when they're 8 or anything like that. But those morals is what prevents people from thinking, oh, since I punch, or if I, you know, ram a car into someone in GTA, doesn't mean I could do that in real life.
Yeah, so like there's a separation of like, you know, sort of okay, there's sort of a separation in like the morals you have in game and like, you know, like in the outside world and reality, right? Because those video games, right, I guess are for fun, right? So,
Yeah,
like,
that
you do
apply-
more things, right?
Yeah, that applies to CSGO and everything, because CSGO is strictly just guns, murder, and just going against each other in a very competitive aspect.
Right.
So those morals is what stops people from trying to do that in real life.
Yeah, like in the game Ready or Not, which you mentioned, like I grinded out over winter break with some of my hometown friends, and like, you know, like a lot of the subject matter is gritty, and like, you know, once in a while you duff a civilian. It just happens you accidentally kill a civilian that you weren't supposed to do, and like, you know, like, I don't want to sound deranged, like here said, but you know, sometimes it's really funny, like, you know, it's good times with your friends, and like, you know, just because like, you know, I sometimes find it funny if you like, you know, do something that you weren't supposed to do in the game, right? I feel as if that doesn't necessarily say that, like, hey, in real life, if I were a law enforcement officer and I killed an innocent civilian, hey, like, I'd enjoy it as well.
Yeah, and kind of ending off our conversation, I mean, Paul, I mean, I know that you wanted to give a little bit of a more like detailing and kind of like putting your perspective kind of holistically of like, you know, all our our analysis here. So I mean, Sunny and me kind of had a discussion about, I mean, it was kind of superficial, but still about Counter-Strike. We kind of went over a couple of topics. And then I kind of bring up the question of, you know, is there really a dichotomy between reality and the game, or is like, can we really connect them? And I mean, like, you would probably need to do like a meta study to see if like these games actually, if there is like a correlation coefficient between them. But kind of ending off with your perspective, what is kind of like the sources and things that you found that you want to kind of end us off with?
Yeah, well, just really quickly, I want to talk about like I think mixed realism, and I think it's like if you look back at Welsh is like what he's talking about. Like we talk about how the game how there's different ways where the game is like a representation of like a manifestation of what we are from the outside, and we are informing the game, and the game is also informing us in many ways, right?
Yeah.
I think that like there must be some sense of like we're gaining some like maybe violent tendencies from this, in my personal opinion, because we have these things that, again, maybe we don't have consequences in those games, but we have it in real life, right? But I think there must be like just the way that they're put together, right? Like being put in the position to be doing these things and having fun, right? Like we have to think about like for example, what Solomon was saying about how he played Ready or Not with his friends, right? Like what made it fun was playing with his friends, right?
Yeah.
But was the game actually like I don't know, like something fun, right? So I don't know. It's like for me, what I think about is like when people read like also fiction too, right? Like some people may enjoy like, or even horror, right? Some people enjoy those things, right? And like I think it's not necessarily only because of like, for example, like, I mean, there's stuff like adrenaline that people like, right? But I think it can go further to, I mean, like, something like killing is, like, really deep, man, right? So,
Yeah.
but anyways, yeah, I just want to kind of, you know, cut it off there because, you know, we're going a little overtime. But,
No, yeah, I could just end it. So, I mean, once again, we kind of had our I know we went over, but yeah, I mean, it was a good discussion. I appreciate everybody participating. And I mean, just to kind of end it off, there is kind of like, I mean, there is varying perspectives, and it is like, I know I gave like too much of like a philosophical thing with like GTA 5 of like, is there really a separation between reality? But I feel that Sunny kind of like, not even digressed, but kind of like lowered this kind of standard of that you can have fun while kind of murdering people, and it's not really murdering, you're just having fun. Obviously, it's a question of should you even be should games be contextualized in that way to just murder people, and that's the way that you're supposed to have fun, or can you just do something like world building with like Hergen Raider or something where you're just building a world and having fun there? So these are questions that we didn't answer, but I mean, they are for further discussion. So once again, thank you for listening. This is Solomon, this is Paul, this is Mahir, and I'm the host, Daniel. I hope you enjoyed.